Hi ho, ladies and gents. Welcome once again to another Johnnie Torch live broadcast. It's going to be a quick one this time, hopefully. You know how long-winded I get. But we're going to take a look at my new campaign for saving Supergirl CW show. Yes, I'm calling it Supergirl Please Punch a Big Robot. And if you listen to my last Torch News Roundup and the last Johnnie Torch Live, number 101, you heard me talking about this before. But Supergirl, the series, has pretty much had one foot in the SJW realm from the get-go. The feminist leanings, of course, from the first season, particularly with the character of Cat Grant, turned off many a viewer. Things only got worse during the second season, when the whole second season basically revolved around Alex Danvers, Kara's sister, adoptive sister, coming out as a lesbian and getting into a relationship with Maggie Sawyer, which, again, the objection is not to that as much as it is to the amount of screen time that was taken up from that one minor subplot. The season 3 kind of was a mishmash of all kinds of other issues that came up. Of course, the issue of racism, the issue of Maggie Sawyer leaving the show, and so forth. So it really was also somewhat there in this past season. There was, of course, the element of religious fanaticism being touched on with the Rao worshippers and so on and so forth. But this next season appears to be doubling down on the most SJW season that we're probably ever going to see on the CW, which may or may not be saying a lot, seeing as how we've already had some pretty strong SJW leanings in other shows, such as Black Lightning pushes that button quite a bit. So does, at times, Arrow, although I don't think it's quite as pronounced. I think when they tried to do a gun control episode, that it was more successful than the gun control episode that they did on Supergirl last season, but still, you know, kind of you look for that balance. You look for that balance in tackling a political subject. I think Arrow did it a little bit better than Supergirl did, although they did both try to broach the same subject. But once again, it's not so much that we're complaining about the subjects as much as the overkill of the subjects. Now, season 4 boasts the first transgender superhero in Dreamer, played by a transgender actress, which, again, in and of itself is probably not the biggest problem. But then when you also couple it with the fact that they have been known to beat subjects into the ground, such as they did with Alex coming out, it's going to become very irritating, let's put it that way. Then when you also have the other plot, main plot of the season, which is going to be Agent Liberty, who is basically an extremist right-winger, which they're going to use the analogy of aliens as illegal immigrants, and he, of course, is violently opposed to these quote-unquote illegal immigrants, which, again, is, they would like to say ripped from today's headlines. But again, that's going to be an insufferable storyline that we're going to have to endure for the season. Plus, we also have the continuing perils of Alex being a lesbian in a single lesbian who's trying to adopt. Plus, we have the storyline of the racism that Jimmy Olsen is facing. Even though he's a superhero and everybody should kind of look up to him, he's not going to be looked up to because he's black, which was something that they started last season. And then, of course, we also have the feminist tentpoles that have been with the show from the beginning. They've basically replaced Cat Grant with Lena Luthor. Lena Luthor, of course, it's a bit more subdued than the performance that Calista Flockhart had, but it's basically the same thing. So, as I said in my last video, I really don't want to see Supergirl go down with the ratings because it's very difficult for me to recommend this show anymore because I tried valiantly, despite the ever growing complaints I had with the show as being too preachy, as being basically a soap opera for leftists. I stuck with it, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to suffer through anymore. Most of the people I know that are into superhero shows, both sides of the political spectrum, have already abandoned it. And there is only one way I can see that will bring them back to the fold and hopefully bring a much needed element of fun to the show that has been lacking, to return Supergirl to escapist entertainment. And I say, please punch a big robot. Yes, that is the new campaign I am starting. Supergirl, please punch a big robot. If you can spread that hashtag along, see if we can get it somewhere in the conversation. Now, chances are the intent of this campaign is going to go unnoticed. But as long as you notice it, that's taking the first step. For example, if the showrunners do indeed acknowledge this deficiency in escapism, they're probably just going to make Supergirl punch a big robot and then say, see, we're still fun. We're still escapist entertainment. We still can do the fun action sequence because up to now, there really isn't one. I mean, just compare this show with Legends of Tomorrow and the stuff they're getting away with there. You got Bebo, a stuffed blue monster or whatever he's supposed to be, sort of like the answer to Elmo, basically doing a showdown with a demon in the season finale. Why can't we have any of that kind of good old-fashioned four-color superhero fun on Supergirl? There's no reason why we can't. But of course, the showrunners are too busy with the liberal agenda. So I chose the Supergirl Please Punch a Big Robot hashtag to initiate my campaign because when you think of Superman, when you think of the superpowered characters that are just uber powerful, what are they known for? Basically taking on some insurmountable odd, such as a big robot, big monster. This is kind of what they're built for, with these kinds of powers that a normal person wouldn't be able to pose much of a threat to. But you have a big robot. Automatically, a big robot evokes the pulpy 40s style Superman. I also advocated on Twitter that they use the Max Fleischer robots from, I believe it was called the Max Fleischer Superman cartoons. I believe it was called Mechanical Mayhem or something of that nature. But either way, it's going to be something that will be fun. And that's kind of what you want to rally behind, something fun. I know a lot of people would see what's happening to Supergirl and what has happened to Supergirl in the TV show and say, this is terrible. I can't watch this show. I can't get behind this show. It's terrible. I'm outraged. Well, yeah, but I'm a firm believer in anger begets anger. If you're going to get angry at SJWs, if you're going to get angry with the show for what they're doing, if you're going to get angry because they're pretty much ruining a great character and a great actress, a great cast all around, but a great actress in Supergirl, Melissa Benoist herself, you're really not going to get any traction. You're going to have the the malcontents that already want to shout you down as a racist, a homophobe, misogynist, or whatever. You're going to have already get shot down before you even make your pitch. But it's something we can all get behind, which is just escapist fun. If we can get the show back to what was probably its best incarnation, which was the first season. Now, the first 5-6 episodes where they were trying to get their footing, there was a lot of feminist crap, quite honestly. By the second half of the show, when they were struggling for ratings, because remember, it was on CBS and it was going to be canceled, and it was probably going to be end of story there if CW didn't step in. change of venue, lowering the cost somewhat of production, and the show was saved. But saved for what? So, if we can rally behind the escapist image of Supergirl fighting a big robot, that would go a long way in having something positive to rally behind. If we got the show back on track as it was in the latter half of the second season, we introduced a lot of concepts that were really interesting. Whatever happened to Bizarro Supergirl? Livewire was basically unceremoniously written out of the show. She was probably her only supervillainess to, pose a challenge of any kind. But we had also nods to Superman in the comics. We had the Master Jailer, who was always personally one of my favorite Superman villains, sort of an underdog character, because Superman really wasn't known for the greatest rogues gallery. But we also had, of course, Non, which I believe was kind of left hanging in the end of the series, the end of the first season. We had Max Lord, of course, who kind of disappeared. Not that he was the greatest antagonist, but basically there were a lot of comic style storylines there. We had For the Girl Who Has Everything. We had the episode with Red Kryptonite. There was a lot of things to really bring out the comic book flavor. Now, one can argue that they're trying to do some things with Brainiac 5, with Mon-El and the Legion of Superheroes, but to be honest, they really haven't made good on any of that. Now, Brainiac 5 is going to be in the season, so hopefully something positive can be done with him, particularly since he is pretty much tied to Kara in the comics. Now, I don't hold any illusions that this campaign is going to be very successful, because the CW pretty much live and die by the shipper cults. Their first priority is to appease the shipper cults. Right now, the shipper cult is Caramel, I guess they're calling it, or Kara and Mon-El. They want them together, the shipper cults. Of course, I have a problem with that because Mon-El is a married man, and it really looks like you're making Kara a interloper in that relationship by making her the other woman, quote unquote. So I really am not too impressed by that. Then, of course, there is the other fringe element that wants Lena and Kara together, which even the top brass know that's a bridge too far. They're not going to make Supergirl into a lesbian relationship with Lena Luthor. And of course, like I said, part of this campaign is also to try to bring back the escapism so that we can fold this show into a younger viewership. There are supposedly these dozens of young girls who are inspired by Supergirl. We'll say hundreds of dozens. We'll say thousands of dozens. That might be an inflated number, seeing as how I don't think the show is really all that popular. But we're not doing programming that is appealing to young children when we're doing basically a LGBTQ pitch for every single storyline. As I've said before, that's not really a problem so long as it's done as in the old days when you had the sitcoms, the day of the sitcom, the 80s and early 90s, so to speak. You had the very special episode, and everybody remembers them. Your favorite sitcom had one of those, didn't they? Sometimes they had 3 or 4. And nobody really liked those episodes, let's be totally honest. But the showrunners used to have a, sort of an egocentric thought that by raising awareness of a subject, that all the young people watching the show would know to be careful of drugs or cults or child abuse or domestic abuse or teenage pregnancy or whatever it is. And a lot of times we rolled our eyes at these shows because it was like, yeah, okay, make me laugh. And that's kind of the problem we're having with television in general these days when it comes to the CW shows particularly, which is give me an action adventure story. Throw in some humor, maybe do a thought-provoking episode every once in a while. But the SJW agenda has become so prominent that it seems to me that that is the primary agenda. It's not to entertain anymore. And I said, as I said in my last video, this is basically what befell Marvel Comics when the agenda became more important than the product. And so I'm more than aware that the first SJW response is going to be, well, if you don't like it, don't watch it. Well, that's kind of the point. I want to be able to watch it, and I want to be able to be entertained by it. And if you care about the product you're making, you have to make it entertaining for people. Now, as I said, the show probably is on its last legs because it has been pretty top heavy from the SJW agenda pretty much from the beginning, but definitely from the second season on. It is only going to get worse. So as I continue to spread this hashtag around, if anybody is interested, try to do something to save this show rather than let it go down. Because it's really sad that we're going to let one of the great female superheroes in the pantheon, DC's pantheon particularly, but in, superhero genre as it is, Supergirl is one of the greats, and the show is going to go down in failure if we don't do anything to save it now. See if we can get the people at the top to listen and hopefully consider bringing these very special episode topics into maybe 1 or 2 episodes. Let's do 1 episode with Dreamer, the trans superhero. Maybe we'll do it as a 2-parter. We'll give them 2 episodes. That's fine. Then let's move on to punching a big robot. Do you want to do something about anti-immigration? Well, let's take Agent Liberty and make him into a villain for 2 or 3 episodes, do a story arc with him, and then we can move on to something else. Because why? It is not going to be entertaining if you are going to beat it into the ground, as these writers tend to do, because they are not very deft at writing allegory stories. They are more heavy-handed than anything else. So again, not to belabor the point, but for the sake of mankind, Supergirl, please punch a big robot. Spare us the SJW rhetoric. Let us be able to enjoy the show again. And if you agree, share this hashtag, comment below. Let's get behind this and see if we can't bring some escapist fun back to the Maid of Might. Until next we meet, this is Johnnie Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.